Welcome to the Rotary Club of Tulsa. My name is Rhonda Daniel, Club President, and Happy New Year! You don't get to say that anymore. All right, let's have our visitors, not our visitors, our volunteers come forward. Invocation will be led by Jeff Hassel. Song and Pledge by George Rutan. On the piano is Tom Wolf. Visitor introduction by Michael Willis. And now Jeff.
Good afternoon. Will you join me in prayer, please? May we be grateful for our lot and compassionate toward all those who are suffering every kind of distress at this difficult time. May we hold back nothing and hasten to be ministers of prayer and mercy, doing good in all times of need. Amen.
Welcome to 2015. For those of you who still write checks, don't forget to change the 4 to the 5. A little food for thought from H.L. Mencken, an early to mid-20th century author, journalist, and free thinker, who said, "The urge to save humanity is almost always a false face for the urge to rule it." Now with gusto, let's sing God Bless America. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon. Please join me in welcoming our visiting Rotarians and our guests today. We'll start with the guests. We have, and please stand with your host, Whitney Collins, guest of President Rhonda. John Points, guest of Tom Byers. Brooke Wright, grandson of Glenn Wright. Terry Daniel, husband of President Rhonda. Paul Smith with Bob Wirth. Barrett Powers with Will Smith. Rhonda Atkinson, and she's with Dress for Success, and we have several with Dress for Success, but she's a guest of Linda Wilson. We also have Donna Grady, Dress for Success, and Kathy Scorvaga, Martha Lowe, and Kuma Brown, all with Dress for Success. We have Joan Goebel, wife of Bob Goebel. Mike Longmire, husband of Joy Longmire. Candace Fuqua with the Parent-Child Center. She's a guest of Desiree Doherty. Dr. Chris Pankratz with Corey Nickerson. And Austin Sigenthaler with Gary McCall. Please join me in welcoming our guests. Visiting Rotarians with us today, we have Mickey Moore with the Bristow Club. Hi, Mickey. We have Harlan Pinkerton here with Sand Springs. Hi, Harlan. Martha Lowe with Sunrise. Hi, Martha. And David Hughes with Southside Rotary. Thank you, and please join us again.
I want to thank our Rotary sponsors for supporting our club activities. This week we have Brenda Melancon with McGraw Realtors, Bob Jack with Manhattan Construction, Roger Dunham with Accent Realty, and Kevin Moody with Moody's Jewelry. I want to welcome Brenda and Bob and Roger as new sponsors, and we encourage you to do business with your fellow Rotarians. In addition to today's sponsors, let's take a moment and thank our volunteers who came early to make sure this meeting went smoothly. We have 3 committee meetings today, Above and Beyond Awards in room 234, Social Service Events in room 233, and Youth Exchange in room 232. And now, past president and my program chair, Bob Sade, will present another Club Centennial historical highlight.
Muskogee was a larger city than Tulsa in 1914. It had a Rotary Club. In November of that year, Charlie Dawson traveled from Muskogee by car on rutted dirt roads to attend a luncheon at the new Hotel Tulsa to discuss the idea of a Tulsa Rotary Club. Later that year, 27 Tulsans applied for a charter, which was granted on April 1st, 1915. Linda Bradshaw, our Centennial Celebration chairman, asked me to review the most recent quarter century of our club, which I realized was important since 75% of our members were not here 25 years ago. So I want to go back to late 1989. Hal Calhoun made what has been termed an impassionate and inspiring plea to the club to do something significant to improve public schools and to help the thousands of students who don't have the support at home to succeed. Celia Clinton was one of the last Tulsa public schools to be adopted. The number of students that have been helped and the number of Rotarians that have benefited from that help is immeasurable. Jump ahead to the early 90s. A lot of sports figures had received the negative publicity for off-the-field activities. Bob Linacher knew that many athletes were making outstanding contributions to society and felt it was time to recognize them. So eventually, the Henry P. Iba Citizen Athlete Awards were created in 1994. Again, early 90s, our former member, Jack Maxwell, attending a Rotary Club meeting in the Philippines where a doctor pleads for medical equipment. The seed was planted, and in '96, Jack started the Medical Supplies Network. Today, MSNI is a district-wide program and has shipped more than 200 40-foot containers filled with outdated and discarded medical equipment and supplies to 36 countries. Back in '97, Bob Vassar noticed that a lot of Rotarians seemed to have missed the computer revolution. Some of these folks were very limited in their understanding of technology. One thought you still had to put on a stamp before you sent a fax. Somebody else didn't realize you could listen to your AM radio during the evening. So Bob thought we should hold a computer demonstration meeting to show folks the very basics, starting with where the on button was. When 107 people showed up, Bob realized maybe we should have more meetings. After meeting twice a month for 13 years, he felt he had taught them enough they could go it alone. Many Rotarians felt the meetings lasted that long because of Bob's outstanding presentations. I teased him it was mainly because of the homemade cookies. Time will not permit me to review all of our accomplishments, but here are some highlights. 1999, the dream of Joseph Bias was finally realized when the beginning of the Crescendo Music Awards started that year. Shop with a Cop program was established in 2002 by John Raines. 2003, Karen Keith learned the Burl Ford collection of historical records might end up in Oklahoma City. With our club's help, it now resides in Tulsa. Bob Scroggs returned from a mission trip, inspired to help find safe drinking water for impoverished Nicaraguan villages. 2004, our first water well was drilled. 2008, Tim Caldwell began the Above and Beyond Awards, and also that year is when we peaked at 500 members. And if all of this was not enough, with leadership of past presidents Bob Linacher and Tim Caldwell, and donations from many, many Rotarians, our club made a major donation to our community when the Rotary Plaza was dedicated in April of 2012. Our club has also been the source of great fellowship and fun one of my most lasting memories was of our legendary Sergeant-at-Arms, Lynn Welburn. When some announcements were taking too long, he would, not so subtly, help move things along by bringing his 3-foot-tall hourglass up to the head table. He would turn it over and the sand would run through it in about 30 seconds. One clever member, one day, on his way to make a side mic announcement, carried a live chicken upside down by its legs and handed it to Lynn. Now, Lynn had lost an arm during an industrial accident. That's why he commonly referred to himself as our Sergeant-at-Arms. And because of his fines, we called him our one-armed bandit. I'll never forget the look on his face as he stood there and realized he could not set the chicken down and grab his precious hourglass. To last 100 years, an organization must be relevant, must do something worthwhile. It must be a benefit to society. In the last 25 years, our club's relevance has accelerated. And as the saying goes, it's because we started by standing on the shoulders of giants. On the evening of April 1st, we will celebrate 100 years of service to our community and to the world. I can hardly wait to see what comes next.
I wonder if I can adopt something that you just mentioned, Matthew. Thank you, Bob. This is going to be such an exciting year. I'm so excited about our gala that's coming up. We have the IBA coming up. We have Camp Enterprise coming up. This is when we really start going crazy. I want to make a few announcements. You will find several get well cards on your tables today. One for past President Chuck Wilson. Oh, wait a minute. He's here. Please stand up, Mr. Wilson. Let's give him a round of applause. You can still sign the card, though. Okay. He's recovering from heart surgery, by the way, 2 weeks ago. We also have Michael Bryan recovering from surgery on December 29th in Houston, and past President Calhoun is in the hospital with pneumonia. It is our deep sadness that I can extend condolences to the family of past President Mickey Immel on his passing December 25th. A memorial service took place January 2nd. Word also reached us this week of the passing of Vivian Bohannon, wife of past President Clinton Bohannon. Vivian was an active member of the Rotary Anns. Services are this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. at the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Please keep these Rotarians and their families in your prayers. I encourage you to bring a guest next week when we conduct our 4-way speech test contest. Now, those of you who have attended that service before, we're going to do it a little different. Instead of having a panel of judges, each person in here will have the opportunity to be a judge and place your vote. So the 2015 winner will truly be the people's choice. I think the way these young people explore the 4-way test from their perspective is fascinating. I urge you and I support their efforts by being here in the room next week. Luann, will you please bring our newest member to the podium? She's not brand new, but we are sure glad that she has come back. Catherine DeCamp.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to reintroduce Catherine DeCamp as our newest Rotary member. Catherine joins us after being gone for about 3 years. She had left to take care of her business, Sage Culinary Studio. And now she comes back to us as the Chief Operating Officer of Bright Star Home Health Care. Catherine also, in the past, has worked for Williams and for Hilti. She's married with 3 children. Her youngest child is 13, and she has 5 grandchildren ranging from 2 to 13. She lives in Midtown, and her hobbies include raising some really cute backyard chickens. gardening, reading, and spending time with her family, and she's looking forward to choosing her Rotary committees, and I think somebody has put her on like 4 or 5 already. And she's looking forward to seeing you after the meeting if you want to make a pitch for her to be on your committee. And today we present Catherine with her Rotary pin and her 4-way test. Welcome, Catherine. Thank you.
No, you can't borrow her chickens. Somebody was thinking it. I felt it. Okay, we're going to have some project announcements. Matt Davis, will you please come up? And he has a Club Foundation grant to present.
In keeping with the theme of staying relevant, 2 great ladies from our club, Linda Wilson and Linda Baker, brought to our attention a wonderful organization called Dress for Success. And Tony Otto and I went out and spent some time with them, and I gotta tell you, when you see the faces of the ladies who come in there in desperate circumstances and see their lives turned around by the work that these ladies do, it gives you goosebumps, and we're thrilled to be a part of that. I would like to introduce you to Rhonda Atkinson, the Executive Director of Dress for Success, and I have just at the table handed her a check for $4,095, and she's here to tell you what they're going to do with it.
Okay, well, I understand I have just a short period of time. Thanks so much for having us here today. Dress for Success Tulsa is an affiliate of a worldwide organization that stems 137 cities worldwide in 9 countries. We began our affiliate in 2001 and are proud to say that we have serviced in excess of 10,000 disadvantaged women at our boutique at 11th and Peoria free of charge since then. Our biggest challenge, however, in the last couple of years has been the implementation of our Career Services Division. This is a program that we set forth with 3 programs: our suiting program, our professional women's group, which is a networking program for our employed women, and our underemployed or unemployed women's program. We have a career services center that has 20 women in our class per session, of which we were trying to obtain all of our desires for these ladies with 2 computers. All the job searching, all the networking, all the resume writing, all the cover letters in such a short period of time. So thanks to the Rotary Foundation in conjunction with 501 TechNet, we now are the proud recipients of 15 new computers for our Career Services Center, a new telephone system for Dress for Success, and some additional printers so that we're able to really service these ladies in need in the Tulsa community. Based on everything that we've done in the community, on behalf of myself, my wonderful board of directors, our program coordinator, we just want to tell you how eternally grateful we are for your generosity, and we look forward to 2015. Thank you.
Tricia Kirstra, and John Raines, will you please come on up as well?
Thank you, President Rhonda. Friday, January 23rd, the South Central Rotary Youth Exchange is having their annual conference in Tulsa. Some of you may remember this. Any club from like Minnesota down to New Mexico, back up to Canada, any club that hosts youth exchange students, we get together every January and we do our training. Well, since the Rotarians are coming for training, those who are hosting students also bring their youth exchange students. So they have a fun-filled weekend. We've got 200 international high school students coming that weekend. On Friday night, our club coordinates the home hosting of all of the students. On the Saturday night, the Sand Springs Club hosts them all for a lock-in. So I'm not asking you to stay up all night on Saturday, but I do ask you, talk to your spouse, talk to yourself, consider hosting 2 or more students on that Friday night. The way it works, you pick up your students at the hotel, the Tulsa Marriott Southern Hills, on Friday night, take them home, feed them, chili or something, take them bowling, watch movies, do whatever, get together with another Rotarian who's hosting students, just have some fun. On Saturday morning, show them around Tulsa, do whatever, feed them lunch, bring them back to the hotel between 2 and 3 o'clock. Voila, you're done. So it's really easy. On your table is a sign-up sheet. You can fill this out, scan it, and email it, or just email the same information or call, however you want to communicate, I don't care. But we really do need families. We've got, we need a new 20 families that have never hosted before to step up this year, because I've got at least that many who are out of town who typically host. So right now we have 200 students coming. We have 50 spots filled. We have 150 more to fill. So think about Friday, January 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you.
I must say that's one of the funnest things I do. So to dovetail into our social services announcement, we're going to have our first event of the year Friday, January the 30th, and it's going to be a bowling event. So you can pick up some kids, take them bowling, sharpen your skills, and the next Friday you can come to our Rotary event and go bowling. It will be competitive, not. And it will be at the Dust Bowl downtown, so it'll be a lot of fun. I went a couple of weeks ago, and I tell you, if you can't have fun there, stay at home, okay? It's a blast. In the spirit, I mean, I can't believe the church got the memo. They replaced the floors. It kind of feels like a bowling alley here. Get us in the spirit. So everyone sign up. We'll have sign-ups next week. You'll get an email blast. I encourage you to come. 60 is the max, so the first 60 that sign up get to participate. We're going to have the Fred Flintstone, Barney Rubble, Laverne and Shirley contest. So it'll be a lot of fun. If you don't bowl, come and hang out. There's a full meal involved. It's after work on Friday. So at 6 o'clock, you can show up and wind down. About 6:30, you can eat. And from 7 to 9, you can laugh at everybody doing this. Okay?
Thank you, John. Matthew? Our Sarge?
All right. Happy New Year, everybody. So I was told to limit it to 6 today, but we actually slipped a 7th one in. So Rhonda doesn't know that yet, but there's 7. So I'll try and go even quicker. So for the first one today, the person who's highlighted doesn't realize he's being highlighted, but John's son Garrett, who's sat right there, John, stand up. He was 8 in the picture next to Peyton, and now he's 21. He was the poster boy for the 2002 Male IBO recipient, and because he came today, John gave $50 in honor of him and Peyton's work in the postseason. So thank you very much, John. Adrian, stand up. He's that. Adrian, thank you very much. His birthday was a couple of days ago, so happy birthday, Adrian. Thank you. Ron, are you here today? Ron Walker. Ron, also at the back. $100 for his birthday yesterday. Thank you very much, Ron. So I know Tom's not here today because we've been emailing. He's in Vietnam right now, and it was his birthday on the 2nd, and it's the first time that he's been back there in 50 years. So he sent a picture of near where he's staying and visiting the Perfume River in Hue, and he said, thank you for being part of the club from Hue and Da Nang in Vietnam. So $100 for water wells, and thank you, Tom, for your service. All right, we have Bob Leneker, and he gave $127 in honor of Bob Rorschach, as Bob Rorschach celebrates 35 years in Rotary on January 2nd and made up the rest of the 127 with a few birthday years. So 2 studs of the club, thank you very much. Jack? Jack, are you here? Jack, thank you very much. I swear, it's like no one wants to be within 5 tables of me when there's an announcement. $150 for water wells, very generous, and it's not Jack's first gift, so he had a birthday on December 23rd, but we still count 2014 fines if you want to get them in. So thank you very much, Jack. And Tim Lyons. Tim, are you here today? Tim, thank you very much. So Tim gave $200. He's 55 this week, 25 years at TTCU, the credit union, 80 years. The credit union's been serving Tulsans, 34 years married to Carol, 2 of the most wonderful children, 4 grandchildren, and more to come. So that is $200. Thank you very much, Tom. And the last thing I have today. So our speaker today, CJ Box, has given us, which I'll be handing out next week, a publisher's edition of his new book, which is coming out on March 10th, called Endangered. So you cannot buy this yet, and he hasn't signed it yet, but we'll have him sign it. Anyone who wants this, I'm going to be handing it out next week, but if you want to submit a bid for this book to Donna at the Rotary office, each day between now and next Wednesday, we will get an update on how much we've raised for the foundation through this, and I will give this out to whoever the highest bidder is next week. So thank you in advance to CJ for giving this to us, and let's make some great donations for this one-of-a-kind, well, one of a few, and make it yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Let's move on to the Rotarian of the Day, Keith Bailey. Keith is retired from Williams and continues to serve on a number of corporate and nonprofit boards. Keith has been a member since 2004. He's a Club Foundation Fellow, Paul Harris Fellow. Please welcome Rotarian of the Day, Mr. Keith Bailey.
I always enjoy having the opportunity to introduce speakers, and today's no exception. This is a rare opportunity for me to be able to introduce a good friend who is a very talented individual. But he and I are both wise enough, with our wives in the room, that they need to be introduced first. And so Chuck's wife, Lori, and my wife, Pat, are sitting here at the head table. I'm sure most of you read the article in the Tulsa World yesterday on Chuck and the book, and I'll try not to repeat that and try to give some insights in addition to what was in there. Chuck's first job out of the University of Denver, where he had a journalism degree, was with the Saratoga Sun. That's our weekly paper where we live in Wyoming that's been published since 1888. His interview after answering an ad and applying for the job was to arrive in town, be met, get on a raft, and fish all day, never talking about what he was to do, and then being asked at the end if he wanted the job, which he immediately took. And that presaged, in a way, his skill in job seeking, because later he became the head of the Chamber of Commerce. And he felt at this point, having gone back to Colorado, Saratoga was a little short of young single women because of its size and some other limitations. And he went back to Colorado, met Lori, had brought her back and married, and he needed more money. And so the Chamber of Commerce was looking for someone to run the chamber, and they said, well, what would it take to get you to go to work? He said, $18,000. That's fine. So he was thrilled. He looked at the books, it had no money. So he went to the president of the chamber at the time and said, well, you said you were going to pay me $18,000. He says, that's your job now. So Chuck clearly was not at the top of his game in terms of job seeking. But he started an event in the chamber 32 years ago, which is an ice fishing tournament, and I'll be back a week from now to participate in that. But it has continued, and I think he more than funded his own salary. But he also wanted to branch out, and he and Lori moved to Cheyenne and opened a travel agency that brought international travelers to the mountain states, particularly focusing on Wyoming, but some adjoining states as well. And during that time, he began his pursuit of becoming an author. And you think these things are overnight sort of things, but remember the fishing tournament he started is in his 32nd year. The first Joe Pickett book, of which the one that Matthew just held up will be the 15th of those books that have been published annually. It was published in 2001. So it was a long journey to be published, but the publisher was impressed, wanted a couple more, and then it's continued to build since then. I think every book he's had in the last several years have debuted on the New York Times bestseller list, and in addition to Endangered, which comes out in March, in late July, Badlands is going to come out, and that's a separate book from a different publisher, and that's about the area around the Williston Basin. His books have now sold 6 million copies. They're published in 27 languages. They've been optioned for movies and for television. He's won every award, I think, that a mystery writer can win, including the Edgar, which is the Academy Award of Mystery Writers. He and Lori have 3 daughters. They now have a new granddaughter, Ivy, is 4 months old, and we saw a picture last night that lets me know she's being raised properly. It was a picture of her mother, had her in one of these banded scarf-like holders with her to her chest. Her mother had her fly rod in hand and was fly fishing. Ivy has now experienced her first fly fishing trip. They have a cabin just behind the Mangy Moose in Riverside. He is a Rotarian at heart. He is someone that will answer the bell anytime any of the little communities in our area need him. He participates in Lori with activities in Cheyenne with Frontier Days. He's been Grand Marshal of a parade in Sheridan, but every game ranger in the state would turn the flashers on and take him wherever he wanted to go for the notoriety he's brought to him. But everybody has a dark side. And Eric, if you'd throw that picture up. When somebody says, would you go fishing with me on my birthday? I'd really like to have you go fishing with me on my birthday. It is just not good form to catch the most fish and the biggest fish. And there's photographic evidence of the kind of guy he is. So it's with great pleasure, a terrific author, an even better individual, and a good friend, Chuck Box.
Oh, that was great to see that picture of that fish. So thank you. And Lori and I'd both like to thank Keith and Pat for not only inviting us, but hosting us and making this be a great trip. This is only my second time ever to Tulsa. I was here on a one-night, on a book tour a few years ago. And it's Lori's first time. And so I was brushing up. First of all, thanks for recreating Wyoming weather for us and making us welcome. Appreciate that. But also, I'm a big fan of an Oklahoma singer-songwriter named John Fulbright. And I was listening to this song the other day. He's from Bearden, Oklahoma. And so I was telling Lori, because she said she'd never been here, so he sings, "Central Oklahoma is my land, it's my country. Eastern Oklahoma is a beautiful sight. Northern Oklahoma might as well be Kansas. Never go to southern Oklahoma at night." He wrote it, I didn't. But yeah, I wanted to just kind of go over, tell you a little bit about me, a little bit about the books, about where we are today, and then hopefully leave some time for some questions if you have some. And then there's some books. I'd be happy to sign them if you want to get them afterwards. And if we run out of time for questions, be happy to answer them then. But I grew up in Casper, Wyoming, born there, native of Wyoming. And while growing up, I was a reader. Although I was a normal kid too, you know, and all my friends didn't know that I read, and I didn't tell them, and the only people who knew were the local librarians. I'd ride my bike there, and they loved to have a young boy who would actually read, and I kind of grew up in the library in Casper. I'm a big supporter of libraries. And I remember I think the first series I ever read was Encyclopedia Brown. All of the librarians were able to get all of the books and get them to me, and then later they would challenge me with more advanced books, and that was kind of my private schooling in that. And I remember even at that age, I had this thing. There was two goals I had. I wanted to set. I wanted to write a book. I didn't know what, nonfiction, fiction. I didn't know, but I remember going in the library to the stacks where the bees were to see where my book would be someday. And I've since learned it's better to see where it was checked out, not that it's just sitting there as inventory. But I had formed two goals at that time. One was to see my book in the library someday, and to see somebody reading my book on an airplane, even though I'd never traveled or been on an airplane. I just thought that was the ultimate of cool someday. And I've got happy to say both those goals have been achieved. Although the first time I saw a guy reading one of my books on an airplane, I was on a book tour, and I was so excited. I went over to him and I said, "Would you like me to sign that for you?" And he said, "No," and turned away from me. He didn't know who he was. And just thought I was harassing him. And I was telling my wife Lori that story as we were going over we were invited to a book festival in London, or outside of London, and I saw a guy reading the newest hardcover book, Back of Beyond, like 2 rows away from us. And I told Lori, this didn't go well last time. So we waited till we landed, and we were walking down through Heathrow, and I kind of walked up behind him and I said, hey, you're reading my book. And he turned around and he said, I bought this in Denver. So it's not gone well. Any tips you have for a better approach, I would appreciate. But it's like Keith said, Keith did a great job kind of outlining, my background, my history. It took 20 years to get a book published. In the meantime, we were working on our company, raising kids. My daughters did not know I wrote until I had a book contract, finally, because I was scared to death to have them think of, my dad, the failed novelist. But it took 20 years, and I actually started writing fiction when I was in Saratoga, working for the Saratoga Sun newspaper, keeping it secret on the side. And I knew even then that what I wanted to do, if I could ever get a book published, was to make it authentic to the state of Wyoming and the Mountain West. And the main reason was because all those years spent in the library, I would seek out any book I could find that was about Wyoming or the Mountain West, or in general, and there were a few then. There's a lot now, but at the time there weren't any real iconic Wyoming authors. And I'd always feel kind of bad because Montana had them, Colorado had them, but we didn't really have one in Wyoming. And the books that were written about the state, although sometimes beautifully written, always seemed to have the wrong voice attached to it, as somebody who had either vacationed there, driven through, just moved to Jackson Hole, something like that. And they never seemed to be from the inside out, the kind of people that I knew. And that was the books that always would seem like they were a little bit too rural, a little too cowboy. And that wasn't what, I grew up in Casper, energy boom, much like around here. And it bothered me that those kind of people weren't in the books, authentic. And I also thought, rather than just all rural kind of Western cowboy themes, I lived in an area that still is on the kind of the cutting edge of a lot of things like energy development, wilderness, individualism, environmentalism, federal versus state versus local control, wildlife management, endangered species, also outdoor Western culture. And I wanted those to be in a book. So novelist Richard Price, one of his lines that he wrote, I'm a fan of his, he wrote, "Circle around a homicide long enough and you begin to get a sense of the city." And what he's saying is that through a murder mystery, through a crime novel, is a very good way of peeling back the layers of a culture or a society or a city or a state, through the investigation and through how people talk and what they do. And I still believe that that's true. I'm a fan, for example, some authors, like when James Lee Burke writes about Louisiana, or Raymond Chandler or Michael Connolly write about L.A., John Sanford when he writes about Minnesota, Cormac McCarthy when he writes about Texas. As a reader, you feel like you know more about that place than almost anybody, and certainly from going there. So that was a goal as well. And so I wanted to write this inside-out kind of novel about Wyoming. And at the time when I was working on the Saratoga Sun, the big story in Wyoming was that an endangered species, species thought extinct, had been found by this little town of Meeteetse. It was a black-footed ferret. And I found it fascinating because once they found these little creatures, they also found out that everybody in town always knew that they had been there, but nobody said a word, because they knew what would happen when this species was found. And I found that, the well-meaning legislation like that can go awry on the ground was an interesting story. So I started constructing this book. And originally the protagonist was going to be a local sheriff, but that didn't work for me. There's going to be a journalist, which is what I was, but I wanted my guy to be able to take action of some kind. So I made him a game warden. And at the time I was working for the Saratoga newspaper, I was doing ride-alongs with the local game warden there, and I realized this would be the perfect kind of guy to carry this story, because game wardens in Wyoming are pretty unique. There's only 54 of them. They're very isolated. They never have backup. They're very much a part of their local community, and they're very heavily armed. And they're also involved in almost every aspect of natural resources, crime prevention. They're very unique individuals, and a lot of them pride themselves on never going to Cheyenne, the state capital, in their entire careers. So they kind of live out there on their own, and their districts are 1,500 to 2,000 square miles. And I thought, that's the kind of guy who could carry a story about endangered species. And I named the character Joe Pickett after a rodeo cowboy, first black rodeo cowboy ever in Cheyenne Frontier days. And I never thought, man, the world is just waiting for a game warden series, and I'm the one who's going to deliver that. I was writing a book about a specific subject, and like Keith said, when the publisher finally, after the 20 years, picked it up and then offered a contract with 2 more with Joe Pickett, that's how the series was born. But when I was writing and not published, and I finally, my older daughters are twins, and they were 14 at the time. And when I finally said, you know what, your dad's got a book contract right here. Next year it'll be on the shelves. And of course, being 14, their reaction was, you're too stupid to have written a book. They were just shocked. But since then, they've become great editors, and they, with my wife Lori, are my first readers on every book. I send them the manuscripts. They help. They correct it. They keep the continuity right. And that book was Open Season. It was originally called Joe Pickett. The publisher changed it to Open Season, and it went on to win more Best First Novel awards than any book in the genre since. And this was the same book that had been bouncing around with a bad agent in New York for about 4 years that supposedly nobody was interested in. Quick agent story, because people always ask, how do you get a book published? You need to get an agent. That's how it works these days. And I had an agent who was very cranky, and I never really met him. I just sent the manuscript. He said he would represent it, and then for 4 years, nothing happened. And finally, I was about ready to give up on this whole idea of writing when Lori she liked the manuscript. She thought it was a good book, and she convinced me to go to a writers' conference in Denver where you, in effect, pitch your story to agents and editors, kind of like you hear movies pitched. Give it to me in a sentence or two. And I did with this one agent who was there, and he liked the idea, and he asked me if I had an agent, and I said yes, and I told him the guy's name in New York. And he just looked at me and said, "You didn't know he was dead?" And he'd been dead for 6 months, and I didn't know at that time. But then everything happened very quickly. And everything that's not supposed to happen with the first novel did, and that it was a New York Times notable book. It went into multiple printings. There was option for a movie that was never made, but it launched me. And one of the things I learned as a journalist is that, you know, opening lines, there's an important in like a feature story as a grabby lead as they are in a book, in a novel, because I realized how much people have so many choices of books to read and so many kinds of other entertainment. I like to start the book out fast with a way that hopefully will hook the reader immediately and keep them turning the pages. So I was going to go over a few of the books and give you a few of the opening lines if you've not read any of these. But Open Season, the first book, begins, when a high-powered rifle bullet hits living flesh, it makes a distinctive pow-wop sound that is unmistakable even at tremendous distance. So anybody who's a hunter or has been in the military knows you know the sound between a hit and a miss. And luckily, Open Season was a hit, and that came out in 2001. The second book was called Savage Run. It was a retelling of the Tom Horn story, and it was about kind of modern-day industrialists, ranchers who get together and hire 2 old cowboy hitmen to kill environmentalists who are bothering them. And it begins, on the 3rd day of their honeymoon, infamous environmental activist Stewie Woods and his new bride, Annabelle Bellotti, were spiking trees in the forest when a cow exploded and blew them up. Until then, their marriage had been happy. And then Winter Kill was the 3rd book, set in a series of blizzards in Wyoming. That one is about kind of federal overreach on public lands, which is a big issue in the West, and especially in a state like ours that's 50% federally owned, followed by Trophy Hunt, Out of Range. These are all Joe Pickett books. In Plain Sight, That was based on some stories I'd covered around Saratoga. That book begins, when ranch owner Opal Scarlett vanished, no one mourned except her 3 grown sons, Arlen, Hank, and Wyatt, who expressed their loss by getting into a fight with shovels. Next book is Free Fire, set in Yellowstone Park, about a really unique actual wrinkle in the law where there's one part of Yellowstone Park where a murder could be committed and the murder could go scot-free. And then Blue Heaven, which is was my first standalone novel, which was the one that won the Edgar Award, set in North Idaho. Blood Trail is 2008. The first book actually is of Game Warden, the first book about hunting and the ethics of hunting. And it begins, I am a hunter, a bestower of dignity. I am on the hunt. Then the second standalone called 3 Weeks to Say Goodbye, Below Zero, 2009, Nowhere to Run, 2010. I'm really going through these fast because I know we don't have enough time. Cold Wind came out in 2011 about wind energy and all of the issues that creates. It's not the first line in the book, but it's one of my favorites from it, and it's, nothing spells trouble like 2 drunk cowboys with a rocket launcher. And then that was followed by Back of Beyond, another standalone set in Yellowstone. It's not a line from the book, but when the London Sunday Times reviewed it, they said, an Agatha Christie-like closed-room mystery, but with grizzly bears, wolves, and hunting rifles, which I love that. Force of Nature is about Nate Romanowski, Joe Pickett's kind of outlaw sidekick. Breaking Point came out 2 years ago. One of my favorite lines from that one, it's a retelling of the Sackett case that went to the Supreme Court about EPA basically fining a couple $80,000 a day and not letting them, no day in court. And it's, hell had broken open and hundreds of bureaucrats were gushing out. Followed by The Highway in 2013, Stone Cold's last year's book. And as Keith mentioned, Endangered, this one will come out in March, and then Badlands in July. The opening line of Endangered, when Wyoming Game Warden Joe Pickett received the call every parent dreads, he was standing knee-high in thick sagebrush, counting the carcasses of sage grouse. He was up to 21. So that'll be out in July. Maybe on the tour I'll be back, who knows. Just a quick story. I do a lot of, like I mentioned, I'm very devoted to libraries, do a lot of library talk, library foundation talks around the country and invited, and a few years ago, I was invited to the Idaho Librarians Association luncheon to give the talk, and we were sitting around the table, and all the librarians were talking about how popular these books were with men and boys who don't read a lot of fiction in rural areas, which luckily has been a real blessing, that's true. And that men and boys they didn't ever see come in the library came in to get these books as soon as they would come out. And one librarian in particular had a real sour look on her face the whole time, obviously. And they asked her, you know, what's the deal? Aren't his books popular in your library? And she turned and she said, I have no interest in a gay Mormon. And everybody, it was sort of quiet like that, and they said, Game Warden, Game Warden. Yeah, and she's still around, so I better quit there. Maybe time for one question or two. But thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you. I read a lot, and I tend to read fiction, nonfiction, fiction, nonfiction, and not all in the mystery genre at all. But I made a list because sometimes I would be asked that question and I would go blank. So my favorite writer-stylist is Thomas McGuane, but I'm a fan of Pete Dexter, Cormac McCarthy, Flannery O'Connor, Elmore Leonard, Joseph Heller, Stephen Ambrose, Tom Wolfe, George Saunders, Daniel Woodrell is a favorite. There are so many good writers out there, Richard Price, Michael Connelly, others. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I still go through the same process I did with the first one, and that is I start with the issue or controversy, whether it's environmental, terrorist, or wind energy, or in this case, the new book, sage grouse is a huge issue in the West because if it is declared an endangered species, it's going to really affect the economies of a bunch of states. So I start with the issue because I think books, even if they're murder mysteries or crime novels, need to be about something. So that when the reader's done, hopefully they've read a page-turning kind of book, but they've also learned something about an issue. So I start with the issue, I research it, I find experts in the field on both sides to get their information and input, and then and the way I look at it is I try to figure out a way to pull the reader through that issue or controversy in a really interesting way. And then I do an outline, and then I write on top of the outline until the book is done. And it's worked for me. Yes? Why can't you? I don't know. I know they're available as e-books in every format I'm aware of. And they're an audio too, and maybe one more? And then I don't want to keep you. Yes? Oh, probably, yeah. Yeah, Keith Bailey, that's one thing I love to do is put local names in the books. And I give away, especially around Wyoming, your name in a CJ box book for fundraisers. So people, if they sign away their rights, basically, and any editorial control, the name of their choosing will be a character in the book. And usually they get killed in some horrible way because all the good guys already have names, so the new ones are usually victims. But in this case, Keith Bailey was not killed in that book. I'm not going to kill a guy who invites me fishing all the time. I'm not that dumb. Let's see, which one is that? Cold Wind. Cold Wind. Yes. Bill Pickett, right. I seen the picture. In fact, there's a photo of him. You can see his teeth sinking into the bull's nose, taking it. Then they outlawed that for bulldogging in rodeo after that. But he was the black cowboy, first all-around cowboy. I don't believe so, no. Was he from Oklahoma? Okay. Yes. Not necessarily in particular based on real women, but the women in the books, I mean, I've got 3 daughters. I've got a very smart wife, much smarter than me. I have very strong women in the books. Joe Pickett's daughters, especially his oldest daughter, Sheridan, is a really important main character. And I like writing books with strong women characters. So, and I base that on the women I know. About what? The highway. Oh, the highway? Oh, that's a scary one. Yeah, that's the scariest one of all. I just zipped right through them. But yeah, the hero of that book is a woman named Cassie Duell, and she'll be in the book Badlands that comes out in July. And that book those 2 books have been optioned to be developed into a television series by David E. Kelly, who really likes the detective. Maybe one more and that's it? Yes, sir. Governor of Wyoming, ticketed. You know, see, this is where, truth is stranger than fiction. Sometimes when I base things on actual incidents, they come across as too outlandish for fiction. But that is based on a real incident where a game warden that I do ride-alongs with actually ticketed the head of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department for fishing without a license. But that's too outlandish to put in a book, so I made it the governor. So I don't want to keep you. I know you end up at 1. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for inviting me and hosting me. Appreciate it.
How cool. I love to hear about that. What a way to start the year off, right? Oh, man, this is going to be a fun the rest of the year. All right, a book recognizing today's program will be presented to our partner in education school, Celia Clinton, and it's Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Do they have bears in Wyoming? All right, January 14th, next week, is our 4-way test speech contest. Please come and be a judge. It'll be great. And then the next week is Lee Goodson, the new president at TCC, my husband's employer. So please come. As we conclude, I hope you enjoy this special New Year message entitled My Wish, performed by Rascal Flatts. We are adjourned. Have a fabulous week.